Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this ICAS webinar, Cyber Scotland Week, keeping you cyber aware and resilient. For those of you who haven't joined us before, I'm Jeremy Clark, Assistant Director of Practice at ICAS, and I'll be guiding you through this webinar. Cyber attacks shut down organisations and are now one of the most serious threats to the accountancy profession and business in general. As a result, they should be at the top of your risk register. Attackers and the techniques that they use are sophisticated, ever-evolving, and defending against them is highly complex. Businesses who don't give this serious consideration and put effective mitigation in place really are putting their businesses at risk. A serious breach can have devastating consequences. That is why ICAS is delighted to take part in Cyber Scotland Week, which is focusing this year on the themes of fostering collaboration, diversity and cyber resilience. So over the next hour or so, we're going to look at how the IT landscape has changed and taking a zero trust approach to cybersecurity, how to approach cyber risk management and some real life scenarios, and a few practical steps to increase your organization's cybersecurity. But before we begin, just a few housekeeping matters to remind you of. You can submit questions at any time through the Q&A facility, which can be accessed at the top of your screen. Questions can be submitted anonymously, and we'll be saving them all until the end of the webinar for the live Q&A session. Please also join the conversation today through the chat box accessed at the top of your screen. This allows you to comment or discuss with fellow attendees matters covered by the webinar. We're recording the webinar and we'll make it available for on-demand viewing afterwards in case you want to refer back to it or indeed share it with others. And the slides will be available on the events page on the ICAS website under the event listing. Everyone in the webinar is muted automatically, so there's no need to be concerned about background noise wherever you are. And finally, there are several polls appearing on your screen throughout this webinar. You can access these again in the chat box at the top of your screens. Please do take time to respond to these as we hope to make this session as interactive as possible. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Kerry Machin, a partner in Mitigo, ICAS's cybersecurity partner in the Evolve programme of practice support, and with Liz Smith, owner and business development director at Lugo, an IT support company based in Linlithgow, which has been looking after the IT needs of accountancy firms across Scotland for the last 22 years. Mitigo's experience in protecting professional service firms and other businesses enables Kerry to highlight common vulnerabilities and explain how to implement a proportionate risk management framework. Kerry believes that the challenges of cybersecurity, business resilience, and legal and regulatory compliance needn't keep business leaders awake at night. It's just a matter of matching the right solution to the problem. He spent the last 2 decades helping businesses identify their exposure to risk, and his keen eye for detail has enabled him to deliver robust packaged solutions that provide real protection, allowing businesses to get on with what they do best. Liz is a Microsoft certified professional with a passion for helping organizations leverage technology to their full advantage. Her extensive experience in the accounting sector has given her a unique understanding of the challenges that firms face today in the digital landscape. She's a skilled communicator and relationship builder and adept at tailoring her approach to meet the specific needs of each client. Finally, Liz is co-owner of Lugo and its managing director, Ron Weatherup, will join us for the Q&A at the end. So welcome to you all. Liz is going to kick off with a look at how the IT landscape has changed recently and taking a zero trust approach to cybersecurity. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Jeremy. So good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Cyber Scotland Week 2024. Don't forget to tag #CSW 2024 on social media to show how you're getting involved. Now, in its 6th year, Cyber Scotland Week brings people and organisations across Scotland together to raise awareness of cyber and cyber resilience. Cyber Scotland Week aims to create a cyber resilient Scotland where individuals and organisations are prepared to face threats together. So for those that don't know us, Lugo are an IT support company based in Linlithgow, and we've been working with ICAS members since we were founded in 2003. Our dedicated team of Lugo Jedis are based all over Scotland, and our IT help desk is even open at weekends in January. We're approachable and dedicated to supporting our clients by becoming a trusted partner to your organisation. In short, we take the burden of IT off your shoulders. If you'd like to connect on LinkedIn, please scan my QR code with your phone camera. My name is Liz and I'm an Owner and Business Development Director at Lugo. I've got, as Jeremy said, decades of experience looking after the IT of accountancy firms across Scotland. So please don't hesitate to reach out after today's session. So your first poll is, what is the biggest challenge your organisation faces today regarding cybersecurity, awareness and preparedness? I'll let you type in responses and I shall continue on. You'll be able to see those responses in your chat if the poll's closed. IT is more complex than it was back in 2003. The biggest demand from clients 20 years ago was, can you make things work for people in the office? Then we evolved to keeping devices secure with antivirus and keeping the office secure with perimeter-based firewalls. With the increase in internet and mobile devices, we were then asked to make things work outside of the office environment. And now we're facing the challenge of making everything work from everywhere. We had no idea when we hosted our Cyber Scotland Week Roadshow back in February 2020 that how and where we worked was about to change so drastically. We're going to be so reliant on remote working. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, how comfortable was your organisation with remote working? The way we work has changed, some say for good. We'll be looking at how our reliance on IT has changed. This new reality requires new principles, a zero trust approach. We'll be explaining the difference between IT and cyber risk management, who's responsible for what, including discussing real life scenarios and taking a closer look at the latest cyber threats. And finally, we'll be presenting practical takeaways and advice to help your organisation and people become more resilient. We've seen incredible change in the past 4 years. That's been particularly challenging for the SME community. And today, many organisations are catching their breath, taking stock and redefining their business operations. Thanks to rapid advancement of technology, including superfast broadband, 5G and cloud backup services, the way we work has evolved significantly. Some of the most notable changes being the growth of mobile devices, which have transformed the way businesses communicate and collaborate. Your team can now access their work emails, calendars and files from their laptops, smartphones and tablets. The rise of cloud computing has made it possible for businesses to access their data and applications from anywhere. This has led to a more mobile workforce and a more flexible way of working. The growth of collaboration tools has made it easier for people to connect and collaborate with each other, regardless of their location. This has led to a more distributed and collaborative workforce, with people able to work from almost anywhere. And we're now faced with the challenge of making these things work securely. We see clients face challenges in security, including a greater risk of cyber attacks and phishing threats. We've got employees using free or consumer solutions with minimal security, and employees accessing work data from personal devices. Since the pandemic, how has your organisation dependence on IT changed? We need to understand the risks of phishing attacks, malware, ransomware, data breaches and insider threats. Accountants hold very sensitive data such as clients' financial information, tax returns, bank statements, and personal data. The potential impact of a breach could include financial losses, reputational damage, legal ramifications, and loss of client trust. How confident are you in your organisation's current approach to cybersecurity? Zero Trust is a security strategy. It's not a product or a service, but an approach in designing and implementing a set of security principles. The Zero Trust approach considers 3 key principles, these being number 1, to verify explicitly. This is a complete change in mindset from assuming should have access to explicitly verifying they have authority to access corporate information. Always authenticate and authorise based on all available data points, user identity and location. Number 2, use least privileged access. Adopt a policy-based least privileged access model. Limit user access with just-in-time and just enough access to help secure both data and productivity. And number 3, assume breach. Zero Trust principles redesigned assumption that every element of your system can be breached, minimise the blast radius and segment access. In a Zero Trust model, every action a user or a device takes is subject to some form of policy decision. The user may not see this, but it does allow the organisation to verify every attempt to access data or resources, making life very difficult for an attacker. Zero Trust is the idea of removing inherent trust from the network, where we assume a breach at all times. Just because you have a username and a password, just because you're connected to the network, just because a device is within your internal trusted side of a firewall, doesn't mean we're going to trust everything you're doing. A key phrase when talking about Zero Trust is never trust, always verify. The idea is to limit the blast radius of things going wrong, so limit how bad things can get. Some strategies to help you secure a hybrid workforce include verifying user identities with strong authentication methods, only allowing compliant and trusted devices access to resources, configuring adaptive access policies based on context and risk assessment, protecting resources on an ongoing basis with identity and access management lifecycle. One of the most important things you can do to secure your environment is to know what you have, whether that's people, PCs, laptops, peripherals, and data. Once you know what you have, it's easier to assess if you need it or not, and then make the decision to minimise these where possible to reduce your threat landscape. To your knowledge, has your organisation implemented a Zero Trust security approach? As you become more reliant on technology, security has become increasingly important. Businesses need to take steps to protect their data from cyber attacks. As an organisation, who currently has responsibility for cybersecurity? IT support has progressed significantly from the break-fix model. And these days, both IT support and cyber risk management have shared responsibility for an organisation's overall IT health. While they address different aspects, they can work together to ensure a secure and efficient technological environment. IT support has seen a shift from reactive to proactive. Instead of solely waiting for problems to arise and then repairing them, break fix, IT support now prioritises preventative maintenance. This involves regularly monitoring systems, installing updates and patches, and proactively identifying potential issues before they can cause downtime or security breaches. IT services are increasingly delivered through the cloud, offering greater flexibility and scalability. This allows organisations to access resources and applications on demand and reduces the need for on-premise hardware and software management. IT support has moved beyond just fixing technical issues and now focuses on providing a positive user experience. This includes offering user training and support, ensuring smooth application usage, and helping users adapt to new technologies. Recognising the critical role of cybersecurity, IT support teams now play a more active role in implementing and maintaining security policies implemented as part of the cyber risk process. This includes user education on security best practices, system monitoring for potential threats, and regular vulnerability assessments. IT support no longer operates in a silo. IT support works best when there is collaboration. Additionally, specialised cybersecurity teams are often involved in handling more complex security issues. I'll now hand over to Kerry to talk more about cyber risk management.
Sorry, Kerry. Sorry to interrupt. Would you mind unmuting yourself? Thank you.
Okay, you should be able to hear me now. I'm hoping that some of my colleagues will nod. Yep, that's great. Sorry, the irony of that not working. So, as Liz alluded to, we are very different disciplines, cyber security, risk management, and IT. Yet we work very closely together. If you look at it in a general sense, IT typically is there for functionality. They make things operational. They make efficiencies within your organisation. Yes, they will always bring some form of security to the organisation, be that in antivirus or firewalls or multi-factor authentication or whatever else that might look like. But we tend to look at it more from a risk perspective, in understanding the problem in the first instance so that we can work out what the solution perhaps needs to be. And it's not always a technology solution. Tech plays a very important role in this, of course, but to get there, you do need to carry out some form of risk assessment to work out the issues that you're facing. So, for example, how are the threat actors going to get into your organisation? What are they going to do when they get there? Liz talked about assuming that there is a breach. You have to look at it that way. You can't rely just on technology to try and keep criminals out of your systems, because it doesn't work that way. Somebody at some point will let them in, or they will force their way in. But I think where you have to go a step further is also to consider your regulatory and legislative requirements here. And I suppose moving on to that, let's just talk about perhaps what your regulators are looking at from you. And where this really comes to light, by the way, is generally after a breach where a company has got a really big problem that their systems have been brought down, or they've had a load of data taken from them and exposed out onto the dark web. And it's generally at this point where they realise that this is not something for your IT provider, and actually that your regulator, and from a legislative point of view, you're expected to do a lot more. It was interesting in the poll around cybersecurity responsibility that 24% said that IT deal with it, 34% said third party. It depends on what that third party is, and 19% said it was a senior leadership responsibility. You are expected, if you're a member of the board, this is your responsibility. If this goes wrong, it's your company that's going to have the problem. It's generally the owners of a business that are going to have to pay any fines if they've not lived up to their obligations, as it were, and you are expected to follow that law under GDPR, and of course the ICO would investigate if there is a breach of personal data. Your regulator expects you to be operationally resilient and to be able to withstand an attack, and they expect you to discuss this at board level and have management information to talk about, the things that you are doing, the risk that you've got, so that you can show that you understand it, and then understand the controls that you're putting in place. And so again, it should be senior principals that are dealing with this. If we look at it from a legal point of view under GDPR, for example, often we see firms after a breach that the ICO will investigate, and they'll often sit there and say, look, what have you done in order to understand the risk? And businesses tend to look at whether they're processors or controllers of data, certainly personal data, but often the part that they miss is the legal requirement for you to carry out a risk assessment on the security of the data that you hold, and then to implement effective controls around people, technology, and then governance. And it's interesting there to say the controls around people and technology. So I think if you leave this just to IT, you're looking generally purely at IT solutions. And the problem is that you have to understand behavioural risk and business process risk even before you can understand what technology you need, because technology won't manage all of the behavioural risk that you have, and therefore that's where you're going to need policies, and therefore that's where you're going to need good governance. And you are expected to be able to demonstrate all of those things, and that you carry out regular testing on the effectiveness of the controls that you have in place with evidence. And again, very often as a result of a cyber breach, we find that firms are seldom in a position to be able to demonstrate any of these things because they didn't start at the very beginning with their risk assessment, unfortunately. So who is it that is carrying out these attacks? We hear about cybercrime all the time in the news, on various websites, and perhaps at various conferences that we go to. And just to give you a little flavour, typically there are three types of cyber criminal, aside from perhaps internal criminals, people within your own organisation that are trying to do harm. Let's talk about the organised gangs that we have here. If we take a look at the middle, often cybercrime stems from ransomware gangs or groups, and what these people do is develop ransomware technology and software, which you might have heard of, and so they develop that, and then they will use that technology to infiltrate your organisation. But like all good organisations, they outsource, and so what they tend to do is use two other forms of lead generator, if you like, to make them money, but to use their software. So on the left-hand side, we have the initial access brokers. These are generally your lone wolves, if you like. What they're out there doing is, the guys in hoodies in their bedrooms, maybe a little bit crass to put it that way, but they're the people that are trying to work out how to get into an organisation. Once they get into the organisation, they can assess the potential of what you're worth, because if you're holding a load of sensitive, confidential business information or personal data, that's worth a lot to them, certainly out on the dark web. And then they would sell that lead to the ransomware gang, who would deploy their software because access has already been gained into the systems, and they take a cut of the proceeds there. We also have affiliates, and affiliates, if you like, are subcontractors to the ransomware gang. They effectively will deploy the ransomware technology. They will buy a license for it, if you like, deploy that onto your systems, and then they use the ransomware gang to negotiate the payment on their behalf, and then they both take a cut of it. And they have contracts in place, believe it or not, on the dark web of how they should and shouldn't be operating together. So this is, as was said at the beginning, these are highly sophisticated and complex teams of people that carry this work out, and so you have to get it right, because you've got to be right all of the time, and they've only got to get it right once, if that makes sense. I talked about ransomware a second ago. There are other forms of cybercrime, which I won't allude to today. I'm just going to talk a little bit about ransomware. But what is it? Well, if you think about it, we use software all the time, and it's generally good software. So today we're using Teams, Microsoft product, or we might be using Outlook, or we could be using Excel, or whatever it might be. These are good forms of software. What criminals develop is bad software that takes advantage of vulnerability that exists within your systems, and they manufacture many different ways in which they can get into your systems in order to deploy that ransomware into there and take over. common ways of getting in. Phishing attacks, we all receive dodgy emails from time to time. You can't get past that. Yes, you can put some controls in place, but it's always going to get through in some way or other eventually, which kind of leads you back to, well, it's important that you understand the behaviour of your staff, and you make sure that you train your staff and that you get these things right. They're going to put links into emails, so people are going to click things that they shouldn't be clicking. Sometimes people will go onto the internet and download software that they shouldn't download onto your systems. And of course, some of this can contain links into various malware or ransomware software. And of course, sometimes they'll just brute force straight through into your environment and take over things from there. Just to give you a flavour of what it might look like if you suffered a ransomware breach. In fact, this is hot news. The Lockbit gang have actually just had their site on the dark web taken over by the authorities. So they're no longer in business. But as you'll see, Lockbit 2, who are a very well known and very well, for cyber criminals, they're very good at what they do. That's Lockbit 2.0. I'm sure we'll start to see Lockbit 3.0 coming along, but there are various types of gangs. But if you were the victim of ransomware, they would encrypt all of your systems. This is the note that would be on your laptops or desktops, and you wouldn't be able to access any of your data. And bear in mind, while they're in there, they will also steal some of that data as well, unfortunately. I think to demonstrate just how sophisticated these gangs are, these are two screenshots from cyber gangs websites on the dark web. On the left-hand side, this is a countdown so there's 9 squares there. Those are 9 businesses that have been breached, and they have stolen the sensitive and confidential business data or personal data of those firms. And the countdown clocks there effectively mean if you do not pay the ransom by the time that reaches 0, they will start to leak your data onto the dark web, and therefore your clients, potentially your clients or your staff's confidential information. And I'm going to show you in a second what that looks like when they start to leak that data. On the right hand side, I think also demonstrates the sophistication of these people, because this is live chat. So you can have a chat with the criminal that's broken into your systems, and they will then tell you how to pay the ransoms, and just have established communication between you and them. So this isn't this is, as I say, highly complex and sophisticated. Back in November, there was an MSP, an IT provider that delivers services actually predominantly to the legal system, but I think it's an interesting case. So they were hosting systems for about 200 or 300 law firms, and they were brought down. But what they did is then stole the data of the individual law firms, and in order to demonstrate that they held the data, they then put what's called a disclosed proof of hack out onto the dark web on their website. So this was a law firm where they showed the files that they had on the left hand side, and then they started to then drip feed out onto the dark web things like passports. There's a DBS check on there, and also some disbursements of a transaction that they were carrying out. Obviously, it's extremely embarrassing for the firm itself, the law firm that this has happened to. But actually, what I would also add is I think about 80 of those firms were out of action for 4 weeks, i.e. they were unable to do anything for 4 weeks. And I think you need to put yourself in that scenario, is to sit there and think, what would we do if we had no access to any of our systems for 4 weeks? Because that is potentially what could happen. And we don't say it to frighten you. Here's evidence that it is happening out there at the moment. So when it comes to ransomware, you do need to consider what type of personal data you're holding. You need to understand where your data is holding. If it's a third party and you're relying on them, what due diligence have you carried out on their security? Because I think the case that I've just shown you, some of those firms won't have carried out sufficient due diligence. How do you access your data? Is it, remotely, working from home? Are you straight to servers? Are you going to the cloud? Each of those needs consideration onto the security of your systems and how that's being managed. and you need to test how secure it is. How easy is it for criminals to break in? And the only way you can really do that is with a risk assessment that's being carried out by people that understand how to do these things. And that's cyber risk management, because that's what effectively what we do is, in a kind way, I suppose, is we do the job of a cyber criminal, and we work out how we'd get in and what we do once we're in there. And then we can work with your IT firms and people like Lugo to put the correct configuration together for your systems that you have, but also to look at policy and governance outside of that. But it's also independent assurance, and it's a phrase that, you know, is very important in our industry. If you are relying solely on one party, be that an MSP, be that internal IT, be that an IT provider, we really would recommend that you take some independent assurance to make sure that the risk is identified and it's controlled appropriately, and that they are not marking their own homework, because as a regulated industry, you know, from a compliance point of view, that marking your own homework is a bit of a no-no, really. So how can we help here at Mitigo? We can carry out that risk assessment for you, which is independent of those providers, which is important, as I've said. And then we can work with you and them to put the necessary controls in place, be that from a configuration perspective or be that from a policy perspective. We can carry out staff training, implement that framework of governance so you have full visibility of your risk, and at any point you can demonstrate to your clients, your regulators or the ICO that you're doing the things that you should be able to do, because we can test and prove the effectiveness of those controls. But again, give independent assurance to board members or senior leaders of the firms that you are satisfying your regulatory obligations. And that is me. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to Liz.
Thank you, Kerry. So do you feel your organisation has a clear understanding of the difference between IT and cyber risk management? In this final section, we'll look at practical and actionable tips and tools to build your cyber resilience. Cybersecurity is the responsibility of your entire leadership team, as Kerry says. It shouldn't be left to just one person or outsourced to third parties. After all, a cybersecurity incident will affect the whole organisation, not just IT. It could impact contractual relationships. It might also result in legal action. There should be sufficient expertise on your board to both provide direction on cybersecurity strategy and ensure leaders can be held to account for decisions made. Good cybersecurity has to work for your organisation. It has to be appropriate to your systems, your processes, your people, your culture, and critically has to be appropriate for the level of risk that you are willing to accept. This is why ultimately cybersecurity is a board level responsibility. So get a meeting in the diary with key stakeholders and let's see what should be on the agenda. Develop a positive cybersecurity culture. Teach your team to identify red flags, avoid phishing scams and report suspicious activity. Provide ongoing cyber training and encourage people to feel safe, to raise concerns and challenge ineffective practices. Focusing solely on the technical issues risks overlooking the needs for people, other people and how they get their work done, and can result in people actually finding workarounds or having a negative attitude towards security. And remember to lead by example. How comfortable are you identifying and reporting potential cyber threats within your organisation? As with any other business risk, it is impossible to mitigate all cybersecurity risks all of the time, and so defences have to be prioritised. Make sure you know who your people are, your identities, and what devices you have, your endpoints. Implementing a zero trust security model is a journey that should begin with setting a strong identity and endpoint foundation. Decide on what data and applications are most valuable to your organisation. For example, you might know that a specific partner is crucial to the organisation and that a compromise of their data would be catastrophic. This should be communicated to technical teams so that they can prioritise protecting these critical business assets. Taken together, this integrated security approach helps ensure that only the right people are getting the right level of access across your organisation, elevating both security and end user productivity. I would imagine most organisations on today's session use Microsoft. Ask your IT administrator to check your Microsoft Secure Score. It's free. Secure Score will give you recommendations to improve and protect your business from any security threats. You can use this tool to monitor and improve the security of your Microsoft 365 identities, apps, and devices. It's a measurement of your security posture, and following the Secure Score recommendations builds your cyber resilience. Security is available in every Microsoft 365 subscription. We recommend Microsoft 365 Business Premium as a minimum, as it has advanced security capabilities. Once you have Business Premium, it will still need to be configured to enable your security protection. Ask your administrator to turn on multi-factor authentication for your organisation, protect your admin accounts, protect against malware and other threats, secure managed and unmanaged devices, and set up information protection capabilities. Passwords are the weakest link in the security chain and a single point of failure without any additional verification. This slide demonstrates how long it would take a hacker to crack your passwords. There should be no sharing of accounts, as this increases the risk. No one should know your passwords, and you should only ever log in as yourself and with a strong password and authentication. Imagine one of your colleagues were to leave the organisation, but they knew your credentials. What if they were a disgruntled ex-employee? What if they sold your credentials on the dark web that Kerry showed you? We believe strongly that if you only do one thing to help protect yourself, it should be to turn on multi-factor authentication, MFA or 2FA, wherever it is available, including for your own personal accounts. MFA can prevent 99.9% of identity attacks. It's free and should be used as a minimum security measure. It is also strongly recommended that you use an authenticator app rather than text message. But as with all things technology, things are moving forward. It's now recommended that passwords are eliminated entirely and replaced with stronger authentication methods. These include Windows Hello, which is a biometric sign-in, such as facial or fingerprint recognition, an authenticator app, or a security key. Windows 10 will reach end of support on the 14th of October 2025. You might want to write that date down. 14th of October 2025. Now's the time to ensure that your organisation isn't left running unsupported software that is no longer receiving security updates. When Windows 10 reaches end of support, Microsoft will no longer provide security fixes for vulnerabilities. Organisations running legacy software are vulnerable to significant security risks and potential compliance violations. While a year and a half may seem like a long way away, it's a good idea to have a rolling replacement plan in place. So you know what devices need to be replaced when, and to allow you to budget in advance. We've actually seen PC and laptop rolling replacement plans be put to the bottom of the to-do list since the pandemic, so now's the time to plan ahead. Ensuring a modernised infrastructure will help keep your organisation productive and your data secure. But be aware, not all Windows 10 devices meet Windows 11 requirements. You can use the PC Health Check app to assess compatibility. If you can't install Windows 11 on your device, you'll need to consider purchasing a new PC or laptop. PC and laptop identity is a really important factor when making access decisions in a zero trust environment. When allowing your team to use their personal devices that you don't own and manage, identification can be really challenging. How can you be confident bring your own devices are secure? Remember, you're only as strong as your weakest link. To reduce your threat landscape, our recommendation is one corporate laptop per person. Choosing a business-grade laptop allows your team to work remotely and securely at the drop of a hat, if need be. The strength of the device's identity depends on the device type, hardware, and platform. For example, choosing a laptop with a TPM chip, Trusted Platform Module, will give you high confidence in the device's identity. To strengthen your Zero Trust approach, device identity should be tightly bound to the user to increase security. This image shows our recommended workstation setup with one cable attached to a docking monitor, which powers the laptop, along with a wireless keyboard and mouse. Each device that your organisation owns should be uniquely identifiable in your asset directory. This enables efficient asset management and provides clear visibility of the devices which access your services and data. The Zero Trust policies you define will use compliance and health claims from a device to make decisions about which data it can access and the actions it can perform. I'm now going to ask you to start exercising. So being prepared to detect and quickly respond to incidents will help to prevent the attacker from inflicting further damage, so reducing the financial and operational impact. Handling the incident effectively whilst in the media spotlight will help to reduce the impact on your reputation. The best way to test your processes and thresholds around responding to incidents, and also to get a good understanding of everyone's role, is to exercise the incident response plan. If you would be involved during a real incident, then you should be involved in an exercise. We facilitate these sessions with the leadership teams we work with. Exercising in conjunction with operational staff can also help to highlight issues around authority for critical decision making. And even if you do not have a direct role in responding to an incident, running an exercise can be a good way to understand the realities of how an incident would impact on your organisation. The NCSE's Exercise in a Box is a free online tool which helps organisations test and practice their response to different types of cyber attack. Now, demonstrating that you take cybersecurity seriously is good for both client and customer confidence. It could actually be a differentiator between you and a competitor. Most cybercrime is not targeted. It simply takes advantage of the connectivity to cast a global net in the hope of hooking a victim. Within this large untargeted market, it's estimated that around 80% of attacks can actually be prevented by getting 5 critical controls in place. Cyber Essentials is a simple and effective scheme which assesses your organisation's 5 basic security controls. These controls will immediately strengthen your cyber defences against internet-based attacks. The scheme is available as a self-assessment questionnaire or as an audited version, Cyber Essentials Plus. We have supported many of our clients through Cyber Essentials and would recommend you consider certification for your organisation. The foundations for Cyber Essentials will be required for cyber insurance. In today's world, we recommend having cyber insurance in place because it's not a case of if a breach will happen, but when. In the past, cyber insurance was included in professional indemnity insurance, but this is no longer the case. This is because cyber risks have become more complex and expensive to cover. As a result, businesses now need to purchase separate cyber insurance policies. Cyber insurance can help to cover the costs of a data breach or other cyber attack, including legal fees, restoration costs, and compensation to customers. And it can also provide access to incident response services. Cyber insurance can help to mitigate the financial impact of a breach, even if it's not caused by a breach of Cyber Essentials controls. Organisations that achieve Cyber Essentials certification can opt in to receive cyber insurance if their annual turnover is under 20 million. The insurance provided with certification gives you £25,000 limit of indemnity, so you may want to purchase a higher limit of cover in case you suffer a severe breach. Cyber insurance is not a silver bullet, but it can be an important part of a comprehensive cybersecurity strategy. Businesses should work with an insurance broker to find a policy that meets your needs. In partnership with the Scottish Government and Police Scotland, Cyber and Fraud Centre Scotland has launched the UK's first cyber incident response helpline for the SME community and the third sector to help victims of cybercrime understand what support is immediately available to them and to help them recover. If you're concerned your organisation has been the victim of either a cyber or financial fraud attack, you can call the Incident Response Helpline. The free helpline will help organisations confirm they've been the victim of an attack and, if so, provide expert guidance to get them back to secure operations. Businesses can reach the Cyber Incident Helpline by calling 0800 1670 623, weekdays from 9 till 5. The NCSE provides a range of free tools, guidance and support to help UK businesses make and keep themselves secure. Here's just a small selection of the information available. The Zero Trust principles fall in line with NCSE's 10 steps to cybersecurity. Passwords now form just one part of your identity management. They help you prepare for an incident and manage the welfare of people during an incident. Most organisations rely upon suppliers to deliver products, systems and services. Many companies lose sight of their supply chains. In fact, according to the 2023 Security Breaches Survey, very few UK businesses set minimum security standards for their suppliers. A series of high-profile, very damaging attacks on companies has demonstrated that attackers have both the intent and ability to exploit vulnerabilities in supply chain security. This trend is real and growing, so the need to act is clear. Based on the webinar, do you feel your organisation is currently prepared to handle the latest cyber threats? And then an open question for you. What specific topics related to cybersecurity would you be interested in learning about in the future? We've just launched tickets for our follow-up in-person event we're hosting at our new Dundee offices next month at the Cyber Quarter. Please register today as places are limited. Let you a moment to grab that code. A lot has changed over the past 4 years, and with the help of AI, cyber threats are far more sophisticated than ever before. If you do one thing following today's session, please put time in the calendar with your leadership team to plan how to make your organisation as cyber resilient as possible. If you need advice, Lugo are available to support you and your team with Lugo Love. I appreciate we've covered a lot this morning, so if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to get in touch, and thank you for your time.
Sorry, just realised I did the old unmute as well there. Thank you very much, Liz, and to Kerry. Saying that there's quite a lot in there is a bit of an understatement, and I've been challenged with the task of giving a summary and a key takeaways, which I'm not going to take up. I'm just going to come out with some random thoughts, if you like. But there's a tremendous amount of information in there from both Kerry and Liz, which hopefully you'll be able to see when you go back. Just before we do a wee round up quickly, if you've any questions, please do put them in the chat now. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I won't take very long with this, and then we'll get on to some questions and hopefully some sensible answers. So observations, really. The first is that the world has changed pretty much irrevocably, I think, although the accountancy profession is still struggling to understand that. I think there's just a wee bit of maybe this isn't going to be a permanent kind of thing. And I think maybe that might be influencing how firms approach their cybersecurity, because they think that everybody's going to be back in the office in a few years' time, so we'll just bumble through until then. So that's just one observation from me. The second is that what Kerry emphasised quite heavily, the IT and the kit that you put in is important and you need to have it, but actually addressing the behavioural risk and your people is the biggest problem, the biggest thing that you have to do, because people can circumvent software and whatever, and actually it's them that has to press the button and open the file that causes the virus to spread or whatever, so your people are the biggest problem. The third takeaway that I had was that the value of the personal data that accountants hold is absolutely massive. I noted that one of the 9 victims that Kerry put up there was a firm called gdctax.com.au, an Australian, there you go, tax firm. If you do tax returns for people, actually, the amount of information that you have is just huge. But even more importantly, if you're doing your money laundering CDD right, the chances are that you will have passports or copies of passports, whatever. There are ways of keeping that secure and using third-party providers who have, bank level security and whatever. But, the CDD information that you have is invaluable to hackers, which is why, fourth point, criminals see this as big business now. And we're not just talking about the wee teenager in his bedroom. We are talking about massive organised crime groups who see cyber as the best way to earn money now, and in fact terrorist groups and whatever see it as a good way of earning money now. So we're talking significant players here, not sort of amateurs, and frankly you need professionals on your side to keep up and protect yourself. So Liz mentioned actually that Microsoft is great software, which it is, but one of the biggest threats that we've been made aware of is on the back of a hacking splurge called Midnight Blizzard, which was in November last year, which attacked Microsoft. And the criminals are being a bit sneaky. I know very little about this, by the way, so you guys feel free to expand on it. But they used the information that they got when they exploited some Microsoft security vulnerabilities to then target a lot of businesses. We're aware that a number of the professional bodies, both accountancy and legal, have been attacked recently, and also that a number of large accountancy firms have been attacked. So the professions, both of us, lawyers and accountants, are now very, very attractive to these guys who are wanting to get our data. Fifth and probably penultimate point, 4 weeks out of business would be fairly fatal. I've no idea whether it would take 4 weeks to restore your average accountancy firm, but I do know that some firms have been cut off by HMRC, because HMRC's security protocols are fairly robust as well, and if they think you've been hacked, they'll just cut your access off at the knees. And it takes not several weeks, but several months to restore that. So if you can't do tax returns or do file accounts or whatever for several months, that might be a wee bit tricky. And my final observation was that MFA blocks or solves 99.9% of ID issues. I thought that was really interesting. I will never again complain about MFA, and I will go and put it on my personal accounts now, which I haven't done for all of them. So that's quite interesting to know. I thought that was a useful point. So those were just my sort of rambling thoughts. I do have a couple of questions. So Liz, you recommended MFA, multi-factor authentication, using Authenticator app rather than text verification. Explain yourself, if you don't mind. Why is that? And is text route not secure?
we've actually had a personal experience of somebody being able to clone somebody's SIM card. So it's quite an easy thing to do for the threat actors and the criminals out there, is to, get another SIM card, exactly the same details as your SIM card, and then they can get the text message directly to their phone. They can easily get your password if it's not a very secure password. They just are able to run that through their software, and within milliseconds they'll be able to put in the correct username and password. But yeah, that just kind of makes me think a wee bit about social engineering as well. Just, we didn't really mention that when we talked about passwords too much, but just be careful of the passwords that you're choosing. That you're not choosing things that would be easily guessable as well. But yeah, authenticator apps are the most secure way at the moment of authenticating yourself. So that doesn't need to be a Microsoft one. It could be the Google one or another one that you use. But yeah, it's just authenticating as a separate way from your mobile phone text message is much more secure.
Cool. One maybe for Kerry or possibly all of you. What percentage of businesses that you deal with and have come to you have already done a risk assessment of some type, or are they coming to you for that?
Certainly from our perspective, that's what they're coming to us for. Very few. I'd be guessing at the percentage, but I could count it on one hand of the businesses that have actually carried out that risk assessment to fully get it. I wouldn't mind just expanding, if I may, just very briefly on the point of MFA and the reliance on MFA. MFA is vital, so I completely agree with what's been said. Threat actors have already worked out how to bypass MFA. It doesn't mean that they can or will, but they can get through it. So your security posture needs to be in a layered approach. Therefore, far more things that, if they can get through MFA, that your systems in the background will be able to detect what's going on, because the criminals will do certain things that we recognize, and we can get alerts in place to say this is going on, or we can stop them from doing it. But so don't, yes, have it, but please don't think that is, I think you used the phrase silver bullet earlier. I think that might have been around Cyber Essentials, which, by the way, Cyber Essentials is not a silver bullet. It's good to have, but I think you said 80% is what it covers. You've got to worry about the other 20%, because that's where they'll get you.
Yeah. This is a semi-commercial question, so where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. Do Mitigo and Lugo provide support to single-person businesses, or are you only interested in larger ones? One-word answers almost.
Yes.
Yes.
One-person businesses. Excellent.
Yep.
There's a question which maybe I can briefly answer. How do you see this area impacting external audits in future? I think it will impact them. The Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act will eventually bring in a requirement to report fraud, and I think auditors are going to have to up their game in that area. And obviously cyber attacks and whatever are a way of perpetrating frauds on business, so I think it will affect it. To what extent, not quite sure yet, but it will definitely have some impact on external audits going forward. We're nearly out of time. I'm going to just one more question, if I may, to all of you. It's a bit of a how long is a piece of string question. I think one of the reasons why people are a little reticent to engage professionals like yourselves is the cost, which I know from talking to both of you shouldn't be a problem, or shouldn't be scary. But the flip side of that, if you do get attacked and it is a problem, what is the cost of an attack and where does that come from? It is a bit of a how long is a piece of string question, but are we talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions? Does it depend on the size of the business?
It really will depend, but on what's gone wrong, on your loss, on your client's loss. Certainly reputational loss downtime, all of those things you need to consider. One of the really interesting things you mentioned earlier, Jeremy, was about HMRC blocking off access to portals and things like that. I know from the one that I was talking about, the example I gave, I know that there are still conveyancing firms in the legal sector that the banks and the portals for the banks so they can exchange monies are still not signing some of those off, and this happened in November. So, you know, it's so far reaching in what it can do, and we're having to work with these firms to give them a clean bill of health so that other portals will engage with them. So it is how long is a piece of string, but I tell you this, it's a lot less costly to prevent it or try and prevent it than it is to solve it once it's gone wrong. And I can promise you it's really, really stressful when it goes bad.
Yeah, and remember my analogy of you don't need to outrun the bear, you just need to outrun the person next to you as well. So I know we've given you a lot of information today, but don't be too frightened by it all. Just, you know, small steps, start doing something, and you'll outrun the person next to you.
Just to follow up on what Kerry was saying, do the risk assessment now and know what your risks are, and then prioritize what you can. You know, it doesn't have to be expensive to start early and just do the big ones, and then do bit by bit as you go on.
Do you know, I agree with that, Ron. And the other thing is, very seldom do we have to turn around to firms and say, go and spend more money on stuff. Actually, you've probably already got some really good technology that will help you. And with a bit of a leg up for policy of what you're going to need, you know, you won't need to go and spend loads of money. And if you do, it'll be a factual based on risk. You know, so you can make a proper decision, and then you can engage with people like Lugo to say, right, I need this technology, or no, I don't need this technology, but it's fact.
Well, it's like Liz said in her presentation as well. Lots of our clients already have Microsoft 365 Business Premium, and you know, new clients that come in have it. But is it configured the way they need it to configure to make it as secure as it can be?
Guys, thank you. We could probably keep chatting for another half hour or so because there's so much in there. Unfortunately, we're already indulging in viewers' time, so we're going to have to wrap it up. So thank you very much. Just for folk that are on the webinar, if you're still with us, there is a poll coming up now, which, if you don't mind rating us for today's webinar, just 3 short questions, which would help us immensely. A quick reminder about some of the webinars and events that are coming up in the next few weeks. On the 12th of March, we have the VAT update, which is always very useful. That's online. And then the 28th of March, we have the Spring Tax Update Part 1. Let's hope it's not a nightmare on Elm Street. And on the 18th of April, we have the Spring Tax Update Part 2. Both of those are always hugely well attended and of interest to folks, so I recommend you get those in your diary now. Finally, links to sign up to all the ICAS events are available at icas.com/events. So it only leaves me to thank our speakers once again, Liz, Kerry and Ron, and for you, the audience, for joining us. I hope it was useful, and until next time, goodbye.